Hello and welcome to another Album of Record podcast. I'm Craig Lindell, and with me, as always, is Andrew. Andrew, how's it going?
Good. I've got my Jose Ramirez shirt on in honor of the Guardians opening day for baseball. Uh, I can't watch them, and won't get into why I can't watch them because that's for another podcast on a sports website, perhaps. But it's annoying. But I still want to show my love for
Oh, I mean, but you
Jose.
can't bury the lead. I mean, if it happens to start after your bedtime, is it really opening day? Like I argue
Well,
no.
they could be playing right now. Well, I wouldn't be able to watch because I'm recording this podcast. But even if I wasn't doing that, I still couldn't watch them because of Bally Sports. But
Oh, well,
that's
so let's just assume that we're all going to steal a number of baseball games this year because the streaming environment's so messed up. The real problem for me is that a game that starts at 10:05 Eastern Time PM, not AM,
yeah.
that game might as well not exist.
Yeah, there's zero chance I would be staying up for that anyways,
However,
because that is
if I
well
had
past my
concert
bedtime.
if I had concert tickets, I would absolutely go to a concert that where the headliner didn't go on till 11. But for some reason, sitting in the comfort of my own home, I can't bring myself to stay up and watch a baseball game.
For me, I would have to take off work if I was going to a concert. I'd have to take off work. I'm an old man. I can't I
Yeah.
can't do it.
Well, speaking of old man, this is the opposite of that in terms of podcast episodes about music because a lot of people our age, we are deep into our 40s. A lot of people our age stop listening to new music, stop keeping up with the latest releases, and you and I are not those guys. I think we feed off of each other as far as a lot of this stuff goes. I think that I might be a lot. I think you're more of the leader in this realm. I think I would be more complacent in terms of new music, and you push me a little bit more. You're going to be leading this episode a little bit. We're going to be talking about some of the records that, and yes, we still call them records, that were released in the first quarter of 2024 that we think are worth talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you said records, and you just reminded me I was going to have props for this episode, and I forgot because I was going to actually have the records of some of my favorite bands that have come out this year because I have a few of these records that we're going to talk about today. But yeah, we every year Craig and I put together year-end lists of our favorite music, and this will be the first time anybody who sticks with us and listens to us long term, you're going to hear us mention this a lot. That these are our favorite albums, not the best albums. We steer clear of using any kind of subjective rating on these. Like the best music is whatever you love. Like I'm not here to tell you you're right or wrong. I'm just here to share what's my personal favorite music. And so I thought it would be fun as we break down it in these quarters to take a look. Like the first quarter is in the books already, believe it or not, of 2024. So kind of wanted to take a look and see what some of our favorite albums have been so far this year and what we think might be in the discussion for our top 10 when we get to the end of the year. Because there's been some good albums this year. I'll just start, Craig, by asking you though, like, how have you felt about 2024 so far in terms of new music? Do you think it's been a good year for you for new music, or has it been not so good? Like, kind of just in general, like, what's your feeling about this year been so far?
I think it's been a really slow start, to be honest with you. Last year, I just absolutely fell in love with a surprise record from Fireworks on January 1st. And that album kind of carried me through the first quarter. Now, after seeing them live, I enjoyed their show live, but after seeing them live, I probably downranked the album a little bit compared to what I thought it was. And that's not I'm not trying to be shitty about it. I'm really not, but sometimes a live show can raise you up on a record and sometimes it can drop a record a little bit. I thought their show is insanely entertaining, but I kind of felt like that album ended up feeling a little bit more like a studio creation to me than um I don't
Than,
know.
than
That's
what
just how I felt.
they
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say sometimes you do have that where bands put together an album that's really great, but they can't necessarily quite reproduce it live. And sometimes it's the opposite too. So you just never
But it
know. It's
was
not the
also a weird case where I'd never heard any fireworks at all. That was my first fireworks record of all time. Similar to a few years ago, um, "The World Is a Beautiful Mistake" and "I Am No Longer Afraid to Die" had that one record that was really kind of progressive and kind of metal
yeah.
indie rock, and I loved it. Um, and then, but that was my entree into that band, and then I went backwards, and it turns out I loved some of the stuff that I went backwards and heard, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, and they certainly have an extensive back catalog as well. They've been a band that I've always been aware of. I've listened to a couple of their albums, but I was with you. That last one was one that really stuck with me and really kept me going. I think that probably finished pretty high on both of our year end lists
Well, and don't
for that
quote me
one.
on this because I haven't brought up the Wikipedia to look at it, but I believe the principal songwriter of that record was like the second or third guitar player in the band's history. So
Hmm.
like is that, it's the ship of Theseus, right? At some
Yes.
point the band is totally different than what it once was.
Yeah, for sure. And that's
Um,
another fun game. Is the doing a band of Theseus game, which we did on Discord a while back. Trying to
yeah.
think of bands that are still existing without any original members, and there are a few, but that's another episode. So
That's another episode. So I guess my summation is that I think it's been a slow start to the year. There's a couple things that I like. I don't know that anything that has hit me is something that I really really love and is going to make my all time lists or anything like that. How about you?
so I would agree with you that this was a slow start. Trying to think like January, I don't think there was anything that really hit me. What I don't remember when Infant Island came out, but I know it was in late February when you turned me onto them, and we'll talk about that a little bit here in a minute. But really, it wasn't until March, like that. All of a sudden in March, like I just had seemingly out week after week, album after album. It was a very busy March for me. Like late February, early March was just hit me with a lot of albums that I really love a lot. So it feels now like there's a decent amount of albums that I could talk about from the first quarter, but like I an album I wanted to touch on briefly. It's call it an honorable mention. It's not going to make my top 5 for this quarter, but that Glass Beach album, Plastic Death, that might have come out in January. I don't remember if it was January or February, but uh, that was one that I was like talked myself into. I listened to it a couple times. I was like, this is all right. And then I listened to it like in my car. I was driving up to my hometown to my parents, and I was listening to it, just blasting it in my car, and it just hit me in the right mood. And I was like, oh, this is great. And then I binged it for like 2 or 3 weeks, just listening to it all the time. And I was like, oh, this one's going to be a contender. And I think it was you who said to me something like, well, it might be one of those albums that you just think is good because there hasn't been much else put out yet. And then once like we start rolling into the year and new stuff comes out, you might realize that you don't like this as much as you think you do. And I would say you were pretty much right about that. It's one that's, as more stuff has come out, that's one that's kind of fallen off for me.
But we're
You know,
thankful for what it gives us when we need it, right?
yeah, exactly. So, it's an interesting album. Like, it's one that like I would say it's good. I would have no problem recommending it to people. It's just whereas I once thought could possibly be a top 10 contender, it's not going to be anywhere near my top 10 at the end of the year, I'm sure. So, but
All
yeah,
right, well let's jump right into it. You and I have some crossover here, so why don't we start with the first one on your list?
yeah. So these aren't in a specific order. I'm gonna kind of do them in reverse order of where I think I would rank these, but these are not rankings. These are just I just wanted to talk. These are my 5 favorite albums so far from the first quarter. So the first one I'll talk about is a band called Pissed Jeans. Their album is Half Divorced, and there's some like pretty strange, different, bad band names that we could talk about so far already this year. And Pissed Jeans definitely is one of them. I've never liked their name. They've been around for a while now. I bet they've been around a decade already. They're from Pennsylvania. They do like I would call it a muscular style of punk, or a testosterone fueled style of punk. But like they've always been seen as sort of a joke band, like, and like they don't take themselves too seriously. They have funny song titles. A lot of their songs touch on humorous topics. But I would actually say this album is sort of a mature album for them. And above all else, it's a super confident sounding album. Like, this is a band that they've been, when it comes to punk music, there's not, most bands don't really iterate. You just kind of do your thing and you just keep putting out that kind of music. And that's great. Like, that's what people like about it. But like, there's a certain confidence in their performances on this album that just really resonated with me. I think this is a very strong album, actually. And
what kind of album do you produce as like a hardcore punk band when you're in your 40s now? That's really the question they're answering.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on. It's just, you kind of get to that point, you know what you're doing. And I would sort of compare it to, like, not in terms of sound, but in terms of confidence. Like that last Fiddlehead record from last year, like
That
that's
was
a band,
a really good one.
They've been doing their thing for so long. They had that, like, look, we know what we're doing. We're just here to just like hit on this peak. Like, we're going to put out this album, and that's like right in our prime. And that's sort of how I feel about Half Divorced. So sonically, it doesn't sound like Fiddlehead. But just in terms of it being a band that knows what they're doing right now, like that's how I would feel about this album.
Well, and Stereo Gum gave it Album of the Week. Pitchfork gave it 7.3, and I don't know anything about this band in terms of their members and who they are personally, but that's where I read about how these guys are in their 40s with day jobs and families and stuff now, and it's just such an interesting dynamic for these bands that they've got a brand name, but not such a brand name that they're going to be the next Turnstile and really get beyond subsistence with their music. And honestly, maybe if they have day jobs, they're not even at subsistence.
Right. And again, not to just keep harping on this, but you go back to Fiddlehead, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank right now. On their singers, on Fiddlehead's singer, his name, I'm drawing a blank, but he's a teacher. He's most of his time is spent. He's a high school teacher, and then he just goes out and he fronts one of the absolute best hardcore bands in existence right now in terms of Fiddlehead. So
Alex Henry.
It's tough for that. It's tough for that genre, anyways. But I don't know.
It's Patrick Flynn.
Patrick Flynn. I'd say Alex Henry did not sound right. Patrick Flynn, yes.
Alex Henry is the founding member, and Patrick Flynn is the lead vocalist from 2014 on.
Yep. So there you go. So yeah, so that's Pissed Jeans.
Well, and honestly, I said that their band doesn't give them subsistence, but when you name your band Pissed Jeans, you don't expect to be in Walmart. Yeah. You don't expect to be headlining stadium tours.
You set your ceiling for sure.
Absolutely.
But again, to me, that's also kind of like, that's the confidence of it too. Like, that's a band that just knows who they are. Like, even it doesn't matter what this band was named, they were never going to be a household name anyways. So that's
not every band is supposed to be headlining Blossom Music Center or basketball arenas. That's just how it is.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my I'll call it number 5. Piss Jeans.
All right,
Um,
let's jump to your number 4, which is one that I also listened to. Um, I'll let you introduce it, and then I'll give some of my thoughts.
yeah, sure. So number 4 is a band called Glitterer. They are from Washington, D.C. The name of the album is Rationale. I was not familiar with these guys at all. And in fact, prior to this album, it was a one-man project. I don't remember the guy's name now because again,
Ned
I'm
Russin.
Ned Russin. He's a bassist and a vocalist. He's played in a couple other bands, and there's one band
Title Fight.
Title Fight. Yep. He played in Title Fight, then started this as a solo project, but it's now become a full-fledged band. Like they have a set lineup of members. They tour together. And this album is probably going to end up, I suspect it's going to end up ranking pretty high on my list. Like it's going to be probably 2 or 3 out of this set of 5 we're going to talk about. I like this probably more than what I ranked it right now. But this is a, I don't know, like you could call it like, there's definitely elements of punk. There's elements of shoegaze. I said, to me, it feels a little bit like if you took like classic Weezer and mixed it with Military Gun, which is one of my favorite albums from last year, kind of mix them together. This band, I could even hear elements of sort of Fiddlehead, a little bit of Angel Dust in there. Like they fit right into that scene of those kind of bands, but it's more of a fuzz punk sound, like a little bit lo-fi, but the songs are just unbelievable on this album. They do, like, it starts off with like one of my favorite opening songs of any album this year. I Want to Be Invisible. It's like the perfect opening song that, like, I love album openers when you just know when they wrote that song, they're like, there's nowhere else this song could go. Like this has to be the first track on the album. And they absolutely nailed that aspect of this. But most of it is, pretty upbeat, but there's a couple slower songs that are just stunningly beautiful too, just well written masterpieces as well. It's a very short album, cranks in, I think, around 20 minutes or so, maybe even shorter. It might even be shorter than 20 minutes. It's a very short album, but the songwriting is just so good, and this hits on so many genres that I love. So
Yeah, it's 21 and a half minutes essentially.
yeah,
And I liked it. I liked the songs. It wasn't my favorite style of vocals.
yeah,
That was probably my biggest complaint with it.
yep,
But it's undeniably good, undeniably high quality, I'll say. And just to hear the amount of songcraft that they're able to pull off in like 2 minutes and 15 seconds or a minute and 30 seconds.
yeah,
And I love whenever anybody's able to pull off a cohesive record where it sounds like everything belongs together. It glides from track to track to track. And that is absolutely achieved here by Glitterer. So it's, even though I don't think for me this will end up on one of my lists, end up on my top 5 or even probably my top 10 for the year, I was just blown away by some of the craftsmanship on the record. And again, this is the maturity of being an old man music fan or whatever, is that
yeah.
even when it's not really for me, or not completely for me, I can hear these kinds of things that just totally impress me. That I think I can give credit even when it's not exactly my cup of tea.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you said about, like, in terms of this being perceived as an album, because that really is like that. Like when you hear people talk about albums that have a clear beginning, middle, and end, like that's this album. Like it's just so well crafted. And again, I've become such a sucker for these like 20-minute albums. Like I don't want every album to be 20 minutes. Like I'm totally cool with when Pearl Jam's album coming out, that being longer than 20 minutes. Like, that's cool. Not everything needs to be 20 minutes, but like these bands that can create an expressive piece of art that fits into a 20-minute time frame, I just think the skill level on that is a lot higher than you think it is. Like, not you, Craig, but just
Sure.
people in general. Like, that it's very difficult to make a cohesive album in 20 minutes, and I love it when bands pull it off, and they absolutely nailed this one. So I truly really love this album. I was just listening to it today, shortly before we recorded. As I was listening to it, I was like, yeah, I ranked this too low. Like again, this isn't an official ranking, but
Right.
I was like, this should be mentioned up at towards closer to the top for me personally.
I think it's just as hard to express yourself in 2 minutes as it is to express yourself in 15 and a half minutes, like Deaf Heaven does.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Which are both incredibly difficult things to do for sure.
Yeah. All right, next, you're going to have to carry this one. I don't know much about this one.
Yeah. So next up is Cosmic Joke. It's a self-titled album.
So first of
It's a,
all, what does
it's a,
this one sound like? Like if you had to compare it to something that our audience might know.
so they are from LA, but they make punk music. Well, they're technically hardcore, but like it's hardcore that is clearly pulling from the DC punk, like the classic 80s DC punk
So what
scene.
are the vocals like? Is it kind
Um,
of barking or is it screeching?
they're definitely not screeching. I would say it's definitely more barking. This is a band that when I first, before I had even heard them, there was a picture of them that I saw, and I saw this because there's another music podcast called Hard Lore, which I'm a huge fan of. It's they talk about hardcore music, and you get great insights. They play in hardcore bands. It's Colin Young from Twitching Tongues, and Bo from Harm's Way, and they talk about all these hardcore bands. Well, they started a label, and this is the first album to come out on that label. Was this Cosmic Joke thing? So anyway, so they had posted shared a picture of this band, Cosmic Joke. And it was this black and white picture of these members. And right in front, you see one dude with a Bad Religion shirt, another dude with a Ramones shirt. I'm trying to remember. There was like another one. And I remember I sent this picture to Craig in Discord, and I said, without knowing anything about this band, I'm just showing you this picture. What percent chance do you think there is that I love this band? And I think you gave it 75% maybe, or 80%, something like that. And I was like, I'm pretty sure it's 90%. And sure enough, like that tells you like what they're going for. Like the Bad Religion and Ramones shirt, like that's what you can expect. This is 9 songs, 14 minutes. Like this is just your classic 80s punk sound, but it's told through a aesthetic that makes them hardcore. But it's very good. Like if you like this kind of music, like it's just phenomenal. There's not a bad moment on this thing. I bought the record after one listen. I went online and bought the record. I absolutely love everything about this. But yeah, this is just channeling your pure DC punk sound, but again, coming from an LA band. So you definitely have like the Bad Religion influences there as well. So, but yeah, that's Cosmic Joke.
And even
Anybody
if
who
you
likes
don't
punk.
like it, it's going to be over in less than 15 minutes.
That's
In
right.
less
Early
than a
outfit.
in less than a Deaf Heaven song, it's over.
That's right. So you're not you got no reason not to check this out for sure. So
All right, so let's talk about Infant Island, their record Obsidian Wreath. This is one that I think I heard about it first on IndieCast, and the word Deaf Heaven came up, so I instantly knew that I was listening. I don't really think it sounds. I in the from a 10,000 foot view, I think it does sound like Deaf Heaven to somebody who doesn't listen to those types of bands intricately. I think vocally, it definitely has some of that kind of screechy singing. Um, but I think that's kind of where the crossover with Deaf Heaven stops. I think they are melodic. I think they are shoegaze. I think it's absolutely something that I love. And like I said, from a 10,000 foot view, absolutely they could play a show with Deaf Heaven, they would fit in. But I don't know. I love this record. I think this one will definitely be in my top 5 or top 10 before the end of the year.
So I'm not recalling this from the top of my memory. I actually went looking for that picture of Cosmic Joke that I'd sent you, so I prepped for this a little bit. But what's funny is after I sent you that picture of Cosmic Joke, you actually sent me a picture of the guys in Infant Island, and you said, "What percent chance do you think there is that I like these guys?" And I
I
think I
forgot
gave
about
that
that.
about an 80% chance for you liking them. And I said, the difference between us, I said, we're both going to like these bands, but I'm going to like Cosmic Joke more, and you're going to like Infinite Island more. And it's because Cosmic Joke is putting out that punk vibe, and Infinite Island is putting off more of an emo vibe. And I don't know if I got that totally right, because I don't know that I would say there's much emo per se. Like anything can be emo, like if you want it to be, right? Like
Well,
you
and
can
they
call
keep referring to this band as screamo, and like when
it.
I think of screamo, I think of something that's certainly more whiny. This is more metal.
Agreed, totally agreed. Like I think Wikipedia calls Infinite Island black gaze, which
Yeah.
is appropriate. Like that's what they are, more
American
black.
black gaze screamo.
Yeah, they are more black gaze than Deaf Heaven is. Like Deaf Heaven is more their own thing. You hear, like, I would say Infinite Island wears the black metal on their sleeves a little bit more than Deaf Heaven does. And I
Well, and
think
at the center of it, really what we're talking about is metal.
absolutely, yeah. Like we don't need to get too far into the weeds of defining what they are, but I'll tell you what, like Infinite Island, that's another one. After maybe 2 listens, I bought the album. I was wearing their t-shirt on the last week's episode. This album is so freaking good. I really like the way the the first couple songs like kind of like really lean, like I would say like they really lean on the black metal early in the album. Like the first couple songs, it just hits you over the head, and then by the time they get to Veil, like they start to weave those like more melodic shoegazy style elements in. And then the thing
Well,
this
let's
album
let's talk
does,
let's talk about that a second. So the first
yeah,
half of the album are these kind of super short songs, and I didn't really like the first half of the album as much. I like it. I didn't like it as much as I like the second half, where the songs start getting to 4 and 5, and then they finish with Vestigian, which is a 6 minute and 57 second
it's
song.
just
And
so
when they
powerful.
stretch and really let themselves move, that's where I really really fall in love. And then they did a song with oh come on, Greet Death, which is another kind of melodic.
Yeah.
Greet Death is not the right name for that band to describe their
I
sound.
don't know what you would define Greet Death as. Like they have sounded like 5 different bands already in their young career.
Oh, God, I
Um,
love them.
they're so good. But
So when they guest on a song with Infant Island,
you're gonna
turns
notice.
out I liked it. Who saw that coming?
Yeah. I
Um,
I
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just like, one thing Craig and I talk about all the time, like, is the power and importance of nailing that closing track on an album too. And Vestigian, just like by the time you're done listening to that, you are so ready to just run it back, hit play again. Like, let's listen to this thing again. And I'm with you. Like, I think the reason it took me longer to get into this than you, like, you definitely latched onto this sooner than I did. And I think it's because I maybe had the same issue with you. Like, as I was listening to those first couple tracks, like, it's not that they're bad songs. It was just like, it's black
No.
metal. Like, it sounded like a pretty decent black metal band. There was nothing like that, like it immediately grabs you. But like as I've gotten familiar with this album, I've grown to sort of appreciate that. Like I think it's cool. Like, and that's a trick that Def Heaven loves to do too. Like, don't, but Def Heaven does it all in one song, right? Like they have so many songs that will start with just the heavy blast beats, just wailing you in the head with the black metal, and all of a sudden it just like whoosh, just releases into these like atmospheric, like just beautiful soundscapes. And so,
Yeah, like regular bands with regular songs, they start, in fast time, or they'll be in 2/4, and then they'll cut it in half, right? And they'll
yeah,
go halftime. Well,
yeah.
these black metal bands that they start with those blast beats, I it's not even halftime. It's like they cut it the it's like, we opened the podcast talking about baseball. It's like a pitcher who can throw 105 and then break you off a 74-mile-an-hour curve.
Yes, perfect.
And that's what
Perfect
these
analogy.
bands do from a musical perspective, which I love it so much.
Yeah, it's like it's sort of the equivalent of like building up pressure in a steam pipe or something too, and like this that moment that you just release that, like that's just what they do. It's just like that switch is so powerful and cathartic. And so yeah, so whereas Def Heaven does sort of all of that in like every song they ever make, uh, Infant Island, they do that, but they do it more in an album approach. Like you have to like get through a couple songs to get to some of those moments. And there's nothing to say that one's better than the other. It's just a different approach to it. But there's a reason I put this as high as I did, because I'm absolutely in love with Obsidian Wreath. It's such a good album.
All right, before we get to the last one on your list, let me drag you off the path here a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, if we had a podcast producer, they would have insisted that after talking about Piss Jeans, that we would have talked about Mannequin Pussy, just
Yeah.
because when we're talking about bands with names that are just blatantly offensive for the sake of being offensive, Mannequin Pussy is right up there. And I will admit that I was listening to that. It was on my phone and playing through my car stereo. And now, thanks to modern 2024 technology, anything that's playing on your car stereo over Bluetooth, the name carries over onto the display. And I was driving around with my 11-year-old, and I accidentally was listening to Mannequin Pussy, and he was reading it and going, Mannequin Pussy, huh? So I had that moment as a dad with my 11-year-old.
Yeah. Well, you could have put them on a playlist with fucked up and but yeah, it's I'll say this though, like, the name is like, it's an uncomfortable name. I think I mentioned this to you in a text, but I can't remember if I just thought it. But I do kind of wonder if today's modern era, where these bands know they're not going to be on the shelves in Best Buy and Walmart, if it sort of gives them the freedom to say, you know what, I don't care what our name is, like let's push some boundaries with our name. Who cares? Because everybody's just going to read it on Spotify anyways. Like, it's so funny when I think about like how many bands, like, and artists that I don't know how to pronounce their name, because you never hear it said, you only just read them. And that's sort of, we're just in a different era with a lot of these bands and artists. So it might give them the freedom to just say, you know what, screw it. Like, let's name our band Mannequin Pussy. And, but I will say this album for me was the hardest one for me to leave out of my top 5. I like this album a lot. I've been a fan of theirs for a while. But they've always been a very inconsistent band for me. Like, they put out some stuff that I really like, but I've never felt like they really like fully nailed an album beginning to end. Just for me and my preferences. I know a lot of people really like some of their stuff, but
Well,
for
and
me,
let's
this, yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, I was
And
just
sorry, we're talking over each other. Even worse than the band name, the as you pointed out when I brought this up the first time, the lyrics to "I Got Heaven." And what if we stop spinning? And what if we're just flat? And what if Jesus himself ate my fucking snatch? Like,
yeah.
I mean, this is it's just
It's
really
being
hard.
provocative. They're being provocative.
Yeah.
That, that's and that's kind of their thing. Like, they definitely like to push those boundaries and make people uncomfortable, and that's the point of the name. When when you name your band Mannequin Pussy, you want to make people uncomfortable, and that's kind of what they're going for. But this album is really solid, like start to finish. They do all of the things that they do really well. And that what I mean by that is they have moments that sound like a hardcore punk song. They have more of your traditional punk songs, and then they have these ethereal sort of like dreamy, I don't know if you would dare to call it punk pop, like, but you know, like
Oh, but
they
there's
do
definitely
all
a
of those
pop
things.
sensibility going on in some of the songwriting for sure.
Yeah, and they nailed all of them on this. Like, this is just, it's such a good album for them, and like I wanted to include it in my top five, but I just had to be honest. I like the five albums we're talking about better, and that's just the way it goes
Well,
sometimes.
and I'm dragging you into this sixth album too. That you know the so that was the sixth. Now a seventh album that you don't really want to talk about. Um, Waxahatchee. They just released Tiger's Blood. Um, I was not a big Waxahatchee fan until the first single from this record got released with its right back to it, and it's a duet with MJ Lenderman. He plays guitar and he sings on it with her. It's maybe my favorite song of the year so far. Waxahatchee is a band that's really just Katie Crutchfield. She does have a band, and they tour and they play, and it sounds like a full band album. Um, but you don't really like her vocals very much, do you?
No, that is putting it mildly. There's very few artists that are like pretty well revered and well respected that I actively dislike, and this is one of them. I have never liked Waxahatchee. I have tried so many times because I understand the appeal and I can hear what like people are getting out of her, but for me, I can't get past the vocals. I don't know what it is. Like, I couldn't even tell you why, but just something about them, just it's nails on a chalkboard to me. Like, it like I have like a physical reaction to it. I don't like her singing that much, and it's unfortunate. Like, and I don't go around telling people they're wrong for liking her. Like, that's not the argument I'm gonna have here. Like, you know, there are some bands and artists who I definitely would sort of say I think are worse than others, but this is one that I hear why people like it. I just can't get past my own hangups with it. So that's
Well, I do like this record. I've really enjoyed the singles from it. Uh, it seems pretty straightforward Americana to me, however, and so when I read some of the real over the top things, I so Saint Cloud was the last record from Waxahatchee. That's from 2020, and that was on basically every year-end list of best record. I didn't pay much attention at the time, but I've gone back and I love that record too. But I think that record probably is more uh, artistically high-minded or more of an achievement. This Tiger's Blood is very good, but it seems very down the middle. Like it's it's very good, but I don't know that she's breaking any crazy kind of ground here other than it's just a very solid record of very good songs, which anybody should be happy that they produce. But we're in a world where Radiohead does Kid A, and somebody kind of redefines the world as we see it. I don't think Tiger's Blood does that, and it doesn't have to. I'm not. It doesn't knock it down any, but I'm guessing that critics will throw this thing into the top of every list this year regardless, almost based on past performance. And I think this is a really, really solid record. It'll probably make my list, but I don't think it's breaking any new ground or destroying the the landscape and defining new terra firma.
yeah,
Whatever critic speak people would go with.
yeah. No, I can see that. I did not make it through the whole album. I tried. I did. I really tried. But once I got about halfway, I
You
realized
listened to
like
the entire Smashing Pumpkins double record last year.
I know, but like
This
I
just
don't know.
shows
I
I'm
was
critical of you now. That just shows a lack of will, a lack of willingness.
That it
If you can
does.
make
It
it
really
through
does.
Billy Corgan's meanderings, as
I
much
knew.
as we
I
love
just knew.
Billy,
Halfway through, I just knew. I'm like, nah, I'm still gonna have the exact same problems with this. It wasn't. It wasn't getting better. So just gotta
well,
wait. Someday, who knows? Someday, like, there's been so many things in my life that I haven't liked for a while, and then one time you just hear it in the right context or the right mood or whatever it is, and it just clicks. So, it could happen for me someday with Waxahatchee, but it's just not there yet.
Pitchfork gave it an 8.8. And spoiler alert, when I get to pick next week's episode, we're going to talk all about Pitchfork.
Oh, interesting. All right.
I know it. I know it's interesting. I can't wait to talk about it. But, you know, that's another data point for you that I think it makes my point as well as your point that Pitchfork would give this an 8.8.
Yeah.
It's like,
So,
it's based on priors.
yep. Yep. So,
All right.
okay.
Next.
Do you want to talk about Stay Inside before we
Oh,
talk
yeah. Let's
about?
do Stay Inside before we do your last one. So,
Yeah.
Stay Inside is a band that I liked their last record. You said that you hadn't listened to it, I think, or maybe you had forgotten that you listened
I
to
had
it.
forgotten that I listened. It was one of those ones that when I would listen to the new Stay Inside album and Spotify says, you've liked two of their songs, I'm like, I have. And you click on it and it's like, wait, what? I listened to this? Like, I had no memory of previously listening to it, but apparently I did.
So, this is a band from New York. These are all people with very, very good day jobs who also are unbelievably talented musicians. And the one time Barty Strange used to be in this band for a minute.
Yep.
Um, and their first record was called Viewing. It came out in 2020. It was kind of an ironic band name, Stay Inside, during 2020. Less ironic now here in 2024. And they put out a new record called Ferried Away, and I think this one will definitely stick with me. It's probably the thing that I've listened to most this year, other than Infant Island. Um, it's just really, really solid. It's probably a little less screamo and emo than their previous record, but just they create soundscapes. There are lots of layers going on, and I think the songwriting has really high quality. I like the vocals. I like all the instrumentation. There's some horns playing in here. Just very creative all the way around.
I would, you know, I sort of dislike, and I do this all the time. So I'm pointing fingers at myself. I'm telling on myself here, but I sort of get tired of when people always talk about like, oh, it's a mature sound because like, I think you can make, I think any kind of music can be a mature sound in the right context, but I sort of feel that way about the Stay Inside. Maybe similar to maybe confident. Maybe that's my new thing. I'll say it's a confident sound, just like the Piss Jeans record. Like I do sort of feel that same way. Like it feels a little bit like Stay Inside. Like we're really clicking at this point. Like they again, they understand who they are. They know what they're about. They know what they're doing. And I really like some of the arrangements on these, like you touched on already, the horns and stuff, like really well crafted songs. I like this album a lot as well, and I think there is a world where this does make its way up into the top 10 for me at the end of the year. I think it's possible. It's not there yet. It's got a lot of things that are ahead of it right now for me, but I can see this being something that I keep going back to. Sometimes like there's certain things that I know I really love in the moment, but come December, are these still going to be clicking with me the same way? But I could see Stay Inside having that sort of staying power with me.
Yeah, it's another record that, there's some records that are kind of short that feel much, much longer. This is one of those for me where it's 32 minutes long, this record, but I feel like it takes me on a journey, and it's another record that feels like everything belongs in order. And so it's one that when I'm done, I feel like I've been at it much longer. in a good way, as
I agree
opposed to
with
the
that.
bad way.
Yeah.
As
No,
opposed to the
I
way
agree with that.
Waxahatchee was for you.
Exactly. Exactly. So no, I totally agree. Totally agree with that assessment.
All right, which brings us to the final record that I think we're going to talk about today. And just
Yeah.
this one was really cool for me because you brought it to me, and then you and I do this thing where we won't lead the witness, and you don't tell me your thoughts. You're like, hey, you should definitely listen to this, and definitely don't quit the record before you hear this song or that song or get to this point. And then when my feedback absolutely 100% matches exactly what you were thinking, it's like the most fun thing we ever go through.
Yes, I geek out on that way more than I should, but I love it when it happens.
You geek out on that exactly as much as you should.
Exactly. But yeah, we're talking about a band called Meatbodies,
Which is
which
another
again,
stupid band name.
another band name. The name of this album is Flora Ocean Tiger Bloom. And I always have to think about that to make sure I'm getting those words in the right order. Flora Ocean Tiger Bloom. Uh, I'm going to tell you right now, there is not a doubt in my mind that this album is going to be a contender, a top 5 and a year-end contender for me personally. This freaking album just hits on everything I love about music. And this is sort of the polar opposite of, when we talked about Glitterer or Cosmic Joke, these like blistering quick, tightly compacted albums. This could not be more different from those. This is 58 minutes long, I believe. It's a double LP. It's an artist who had a lot to say with this. It's really ostensibly a 2-person band, at least in terms of when this album was made. It's Chad Yubovich. He's a bass player and singer, but he also plays guitar. But he was a bass player for Ty Segall. He played around with what's their that other band? It's gonna drive me nuts, but I can't think of it. But he played around in that whole scene. Ty Segall. There's man, I'm drawing a blank now. You see, I should do my research before the episode. But anyways, so Chad Yuvovich wanted to like kind of do his own thing. So he was sort of like messing around with all these
So he
demos.
was the bass guitarist for the Michael Cronin band and then went on tour with Ty Segall.
Yeah, yeah. And then he played bass in another band with
Fuzz.
Fuzz. Yeah.
See, I'm the research guy. That's what I do.
This like I remember like I never fully got into that. Like this is like your garage fuzz, like West Coast garage fuzz scene. Like these guys, Michael Cronin, Ty Segall. Like I remember in the 2010s, like there was a lot of buzz about these bands on like sort of the blog when we talked about in the past about like indie blogs. Like these kind of guys got like a lot of, but they were almost too prolific. Like all these guys were just putting out so many albums, these like quick little 25-minute albums. They're putting out EPs nonstop, random singles. They were doing split EPs with each other. Like there's so much stuff that like I couldn't keep up with it, and I just never dove down that rabbit hole. Well,
so and based on the descriptions and everything that people say about this band, it should be stoner rock, but it's too polished. It's too
yes.
psychedelic. It's out of the garage and into the studio, and I think
Yes. And
the
that's what
sound is just
sets it
incredible.
apart.
But what was the sound that you heard instantly on that one song and that I heard
Yeah.
instantly?
So the second track, Whole, um, as I was listening to the song, like I was like, this sounds like Smashing Pumpkins. I was like, this just hit me over the head with like the heavy fuzz guitars, like of the
Specifically, it
Smashing
sounds like
Pumpkins.
Cherub Rock.
Yeah, and but then like halfway through the song, he starts playing these lead guitar parts that sound like freaking Oasis, and I'm like, dude, this like he's playing or excuse me, Noel Gallagher style leads on like a Smashing Pumpkins song, and it blew my mind at how well they pulled that off. And then, sure enough, even the Pitchfork review of this mentioned pulling in the influences of Oasis and Smashing Pumpkins. The Smashing Pumpkins one, like, you know, yeah, like you could hear it in the bass. Like, it's funny that Chad Yubovich was a bass player, because you can tell like a lot of these songs are written bass first. And like so many of these songs have these kind of like driving bass lines that just give you like the steady like underbelly of the entire song, while the guitars go on these expansive like journeys all over the place. So many of these songs just wander all over the place. You, like you said, there's a psychedelic element to it, but rather than like leaning full into like that psych rock scene, it like you're hearing so many 90s influences in this. Like even like I even hear some Jane's Addiction, like the song Move. It's got this long like extended bridge part, and he's just wailing out these parts that to me sound like Perry Farrell. Like it almost could sound like something like Coming Down the Mountain or something like that, like in terms of just being a jam in the middle of a song. Like,
But here's the other thing about it. So I like it. I enjoy listening to it. But I'm gonna have to listen to it another 150 times to expect all the things that come next. It's not
you know,
it's not all right. I'm gonna say it's not clean. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like there's no clean beginning, middle, and ending. There are no pop sensibilities to this. It meanders so much that you
yep.
basically have to memorize what these songs are going to be because they don't follow normal convention.
I think what's interesting about that point too, Craig, is like I do wonder to what degree uh me buying this on vinyl made a huge difference for that, because I can tell you right now, at least 5 times already, I have just laid on my couch and held the liner notes and followed along the lyrics in these songs. And so I have a map in my mind now. Like I
That's
have
some active
I,
listening.
I have a yes, I have a physical like connection to this. Like I can tell you what every song, like I know the song names on this. Like we've talked about this. Like I normally don't know song names anymore, but I know every song name on this. I can tell you what order the songs are in. Like I know this album front and back already. I've just fallen so deeply in love with this album. Uh, and the story is really interesting. Chad Yubovich as well. It's I was saying earlier, like it's really like this was really a 2-person project. And I don't remember the drummer's name off the top of my head, but it's essentially Yubovich, and then he's got a drummer that plays on everything. Now
It's
there
Chad Yubovich, Dylan Fujioka, Noah Guevara, and Casey Hansen.
So Noah Guevara, he only tours with them. He does not appear on this album at all. He didn't play bass on. He's their touring bass player, but he might be a full member of the band. He just didn't play on the record. But on the record, it's all Yubovich and the drummer, and then the is it Corey
So
Hans
it's
or
weird. It says
Casey?
Corey Hansen is a
Because they're
past
brother.
member, and then Casey Hansen is a current member.
Okay, so they're brothers, but they each play on this album on like one or two songs. Like, so any moment where you hear 2 guitar solos happening at the same time, which happens maybe 3 times on this album, that's Yubovich is playing one of the solos, and one of the Hansons is playing the other one. I don't remember. I don't remember which, but anyways, uh, like the opening track on this album, The Assignment, is really great too. Like again, it's a perfect thing that just sets the mood. Like it sets the tone for what you're about to expect. And I really love the way it builds. That's got a lot of Oasis influences in that song as well. It's just the I think that so many of these songs you could play on the radio in the 90s and it would fit right in. Like that heavy crunch, that fuzz crunch sound that he has on his guitars is just so good. But yeah, so I to finish my point from earlier, because I keep getting sidetracked though, Yubovich, he when he started doing Meatbodies, he put out a couple albums, and then he ended up going into, I think he went to rehab, or if he got, I don't know if he went to rehab or got sober on his own, but he had like a lot of drug problems early in his life, and right when he got clean and sober, he started working on this what would become this album. But then COVID happens, so he has to completely put it on hold, and he shelves it. Then his house gets condemned by the city. He apparently gets pneumonia, and such a bad case of pneumonia that he actually loses the ability to walk for a while, and doesn't know how to play instruments anymore. And he has to like basically rebuild all this stuff, and then he comes back and puts together this album. And there, I think like when you like read some of these lyrics and you sort of know that backstory, you kind of understand this perspective that he's coming from. And I think it's interesting that he doesn't like these lyrics allude to a lot of the drug use. There's a lot of drug imagery. Like, again, like when you're leaning into that psychedelic sound, it's only natural to sort of have that, but it's not done in a glorifying way, but it's also not done in a shaming way. It's more of like, this is just who I've been and where I've come from. And the journey of this album to me is sort of like where he's coming out the other side on this album. And that it closes with the song called Gate that kind of talks about sort of that, like coming out the other side of that gate. And I just think it's the perfect metaphor for his journey. And I love that about this album. It's completely won me over. I'm all in. So that's my
also a
number one
perfect
album so
album
far.
for us to finish on, because if you enjoy when we talk about the old days and remembering some guys and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains, and you mentioned Jane's Addiction, Porno for Pyros obviously fits into that as well. You know, you're right. A lot of these songs, you could have put them in between tracks on a 90s playlist, and people would have been like, I don't remember this in the moment, but I love it. It sounds great.
Yeah. It does. It has that sound of that era. Like it would just fit right in with that. And I think that's pretty cool to somebody like me who grew up loving all that 90s music. Like in the liner notes, he talks about like a lot of different like 80s music, and he talks about Iggy Pop, but like I don't hear those influences as much as I do the 90s stuff that I hear. But maybe that's just my own context, because that's what I'm more familiar with. But
No, I agree with you, and I really don't hear Iggy Pop. I definitely, when I think of Iggy Pop, I think of a very specific sound, and this doesn't sound anything like that to me.
yeah.
So I'm with you. Although, maybe what was it Lust for Life? Was that the one that was on
Yeah.
the Carnival
Okay.
Cruise?
I suppose you could like pull
There's
some
definitely
elements of
some
that.
70s vibes. But
Definitely
I
a
think it's
70s. Yes.
but I think it's 70s in the same way that the 90s kind of filtered the 70s and made the 70s into what the 90s was, because you couldn't have the 90s without the classic rock of the 70s, but it sounded sonically just more and more.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
perfectly said.
because you couldn't have Smashing Pumpkins without Kiss, right? And I hate
Right.
Kiss.
Yeah, but you couldn't. I mean, you wouldn't have Pearl Jam without the Who. You wouldn't have, or
I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were making fun of the fact that was it McCready who used to essentially dress like Stevie Ray Vaughan?
yeah, oh yeah, with the hats and everything. Yeah, and the vests. He would wear the vest. Yeah, man. Mike McCready has
Silliness.
gone through. He's gone through some phases. He's gone through some phases.
Haven't
That's
we
for
all,
sure.
though?
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, is there anything else that we need to talk about for the record? Is there what are you looking forward to? What's on your radar for Q2 or the rest of this year?
Yeah, for Q2, I've got a few things
Other
I'm
than
really looking
Cloud
for.
Nothings,
I've got Cloud Nothings for sure.
Pearl
Pearl
Jam.
Jam, obviously. I'm really, really looking forward to the new Dive album, which is not a band that I've been like super in love with in the past. Like but their singles so far from this album have just completely won me over. I'm very, very much looking forward to that one. I personally, I don't think you like Vampire Weekend as much as I do, but I'm really looking forward to that album to see what they're up to. Trying to think if
Is
there's anything
Bully doing a
else.
new record, or are we just getting some singles?
I don't know what she's up to actually. She did the piano song, which
One of the best
Atom
songs of
Bomb,
the year so
Atom
far.
Bomb, which is
Yeah.
amazing. She just crushed that. And then she did a song with Blonde Shell that she just put out this week as well. But I don't
So
think
I haven't
anything has been
listened to that
announced
yet,
yet.
but
Oh
that's
man,
like that's I love Blonde
it's
Shell. That was one
very
of my
good.
favorite records.
It's very good. Yeah. So, but I don't think I've not seen a formal announcement as to what she's up to. But I would say those are probably the things I'm most looking forward to.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. All right, well, I guess we'll do it again in 3 months.
Hopefully,
Um,
hopefully we can have some good stuff. Hopefully, quarter two can match up to some of the stuff we've had this quarter. But it's been a pretty,
I hope it goes
I
way
would,
over the top, to be honest.
yeah, yeah, me
Um,
too.
but yeah, this is an interactive show. Make sure you let us know the new things that you checked out in the first quarter, the stuff that we might have missed. Um, Send all the punk stuff Andrew's way, all the emo stuff my way, and then whatever crosses over to both of us.
Absolutely, I'm always looking for new stuff to listen to. So please do let me know. What are you
And
guys
maybe
listening
maybe
to?
if you send it, maybe he'll find his way to get all the way through it, unlike Waxahatchee.
That's right. I
All right,
probably
well, thanks
will.
so much for joining us, everybody. We will talk to you next time on the Album of Record podcast.